So today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to deconstruct a story to pull out the powerful economic ideas hidden just beneath the surface. We'll get into what happens when a community's formal economy starts to fall apart and what rises up to take its place.
Right out of the gate, our story hits us with this incredibly powerful idea. It frames money not as something with its own value, but as a social contract, a promise. And this really sets the stage for the big question. What happens when that promise feels like it's about to be broken?
At the very heart of this story is an inheritance, but it's just 4 simple objects. You've got this featureless coin, which kind of represents the fading formal economy. But then you have the seeds, the key, and the ledger. And these things symbolize totally different, way more durable forms of wealth. We're going to unpack every single one.
All right, first up, let's look at what happens when money forgets its purpose, which leads to the breakdown of that central promise we were just talking about.
The story gives us this really sharp definition of what money, conventional money, actually is. It's not about gold or silver, it's about a shared belief, a social agreement. And this is the critical point, right? Because it's just an agreement. It's fragile. It can be weakened by inflation, by debasement, or just by people losing faith in it. And this slide just perfectly lays out the shift that's happening. On the one hand, you have the symbols of that formal economy, the worn out coin, the paper bills, and they're becoming these unstable promises. But on the other hand, you have the durable reality of things that are just useful right now. A pencil, a sack of grain, and that reliable rhythm of community exchange. Value literally moves from the abstract to the tangible. So in response to all this instability, a whole different system starts to emerge. The story calls it the soft economy, an alternative network that runs on a completely different set of rules. Okay, so let's break down how this actually works. This slide walks us through a typical transaction. Notice there's no cash here. A real immediate need, a broken oven, is met with a tangible skill. The payment is direct and useful. Who wouldn't want warm bread? And importantly, the whole thing is recorded, not in some bank, but in a shared community ledger built on trust. Okay, let's really dive into this because this quote, it's the key to the whole system. The currency of this soft economy isn't a coin, it's your social reputation. That ledger isn't just about accounting, it's about accountability. If you make a bad trade, everyone knows it because everyone sees each other's faces. Trust is the real capital that backs every single transaction. Now, this isn't just some random, chaotic bartering system. The story actually builds out a whole new framework for what wealth is, and it rests on 3 distinct pillars of value. Pillar number 1 is your personal capability. Basically, what can you do? It's symbolized by that handmade brass key. And this kind of wealth is incredibly resilient because, as the story points out, a sharp chisel doesn't inflate. Your skills and your tools are an amazingly reliable store of value. All right, pillar number 2 is all about assets that produce more value over time. We call these generative assets. The most obvious example, of course, is the seed packet. You plant a seed, you get a whole harvest. But the story expands this idea to include knowledge. I love this line from the baker, who says, "Advice is the only thing that grows when you spend it." And the third, and maybe the most critical pillar, is social capital. This is the value that's stored in your relationships and your reputation. It's the whole network that allows the community to function, as one character puts it so beautifully as each other's pantry. That leather ledger is the perfect symbol for it. It's a record of mutual support. This is where it gets really fascinating, right? This slide shows us what that new accounting actually looks like. The ledger doesn't just track money. It tracks the exchange of real goods, the transfer of knowledge, and the creation of social connections. Mending a lock isn't just paid for with flour, it's paid for with advice. Moving a table gets you some thread, sure, but it also gets you a valuable introduction. It's a whole new way of seeing value. So, where does all this lead? Well, this whole system, these 3 pillars, they all culminate in this really powerful new definition of what it even means to be wealthy: resilience. And there it is. This is the core thesis of the entire story. Wealth isn't about how much you have stacked up or the number in your bank account. It's about resilience. It's the ability of you or your community to keep functioning and hold its shape even when all the external systems are under stress. It's all about continuity.
So the story boils this entire philosophy down into a simple three-part strategy. The formal economy, it still has a place. Keep your savings. But just as important are your tools and your tangible skills. And maybe most important of all is your word, your reputation. And that's a choice you get to make every single day. So we want to leave you with a final question, drawn right from the logic of this story. If you were to take stock not just of your money, but of your durable skills, your generative assets, and your social capital, what would your true ledger say about your wealth?